Welcome, everyone. My name is Mitch Waite, and I'm here with Chris Hardman and Dan Jensen, and this is episode 3 of the Dwelt podcast. We have a lot to go over today. We have a whole list of topics from all of our listeners and tons of stuff coming off of X. Plus, we've got a full schedule based on just everything that's happening in the news. It's crazy. I mean, we had Israel attacking Damascus, which ended up allegedly killing some Iranian officials, and Iran saying that they're going to get even. We've got aftermath from the terrorists in Russia and Russian officials saying they're going to get even, and even calling out Ukrainian officials for funding the thing. We've got bridges being hit by barges, one of them falling down and disrupting, I think I read 2% of the imports to the U.S. We've got General Conference for the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints coming up this weekend. We have an eclipse coming right after that. We have CERN being started up the same day. We have NASA shooting missiles at their rockets at the eclipse. FEMA giving warnings about shortages of supplies, National Guards being activated, schools being shut down. Holy crap. When it rains, it pours. So welcome to the podcast. We're excited to get started. Chris, you want to kick us off with one or two items on the list?
Sure. Yeah. Welcome to 2024. It's kind of crazy.
Yeah.
Just before I start, a lot of people have been like, what is this podcast even about? And it's about whatever we want it to be about. Okay. So
Yeah.
just buckle up. It's going to be fun. We'll talk some preparation stuff, but we wouldn't be having fun if we weren't talking about the world ending at the same time. So we got a lot of questions. So should we just start at the top and start going through them? A lot of
maybe.
these
Let's see what we got.
Okay, a lot of these are prep related. So the first one after episode 2 was, is there anything specific that women should do to prepare, both in the event that something were to happen to their significant other, or so that they're not just like a commodity to bad people?
Yeah. Why don't you guys take this first, and then I'll chime in with my thoughts, because we've actually gone through this at my family.
I don't know. Dan, do you have any thoughts?
Man, that's a great question. It seems like, so the question was like, what would they do if their partner or significant other was gone or killed or who knows what? Is that right?
Right. Is there anything women should do specifically to prepare because of that potential scenario?
And see, this is why we do this, because it gets me thinking as well. I'm thinking like from my wife's perspective, like what she might say or what she would do. And I tend to think that it would be pretty stressful, right? And especially if there's kids in the picture, trying to know like how to handle things when you've got these kids and then you don't have your partner that you're used to having there. So that would be, to me, pretty stressful. And so I think one thought that comes to my mind to prepare would be to have conversations before any of it happens with your kids and discuss different strategies, right? Like, okay, how old are the kids? What could the oldest child do to contribute to help? Make sure that mom is calm, make sure that she is focused, right? Like on what they can do if there's danger, of course. And so to me, just preparing your kids for that possible scenario would be at least a big one that I would want to do. Yeah. And that's my initial reaction to it.
Just for a little context, it was my neighbor who asked me this, and he has a few daughters and a wife, and he's like, man, what if, we talked about the local drug dealer taking over your neighborhood. Like, what if the local drug dealer rolled up and killed me? And it's just, 4 girls left in the house. What's going to happen? And I can understand that would be like a really terrible thing to think about. And so I get why you would want to think about this. and prepare the best you can. I don't know what the answer is. I mean, I don't know what the answer is differently than anybody else. Like, you just prepare.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess get good with guns, learn how to like take care of things and grow things and do what you keep, just what we're doing too. So I don't know, Mitch, what do you think?
All right, man, here we go. We've talked about this extensively because if you turn to the scriptures and specifically Isaiah, it actually lays out that men are going to be very spare in the coming day. If you read in Isaiah chapter 8, it talks about Isaiah chapter 7 talks about the Assyrian coming and invading and coming through the land, cutting down the men as a razor shaves whiskers. So the men are the whiskers and they're getting sliced down. And so it's going to happen. And then if you go to Isaiah chapter 13, which is 2 Nephi 23, you may recognize this. Let's see, verse 12 says, verse 11 says, I will punish the world for their evil and the wicked for their iniquity, and I will cause the arrogancy of the proud to cease. I think that's specifically talking about the United States, and we can get into that further. And will lay low the haughtiness of the terrible. Haughtiness, that's referring to Isaiah chapter 3, where he talks about the daughters of Zion with their mantles, wimples, and crisping pins. And if you go to the end of Isaiah chapter 3, the last verse, I think it's the last verse talks about instead of beauty, there will be sickness. Instead of a delightful smell, there will be stink, like all this stuff. And then the last verse says, and their sons will be cut down by the sword, like their men will be cut down by the sword. Well, in Isaiah chapter 13, which is again 2 Nephi 23, it says, I will make a man more precious than fine gold, even a man than the golden wedge of Ophir. Ophir is one of those lands, if you remember, right after the Garden of Eden, it talks about Havilah and some of these other places. Well, Ophir was a place that had a bunch of gold. We don't know anything about the golden wedge of Ophir, but I don't see them lying around everywhere. So I'm assuming they're pretty rare. And yeah, men will be cut down. And so as we've been studying the scriptures and trying to understand, the eschatology, the signs of the times, we realize that there will be very few men left. And back to Isaiah chapter 8, the Lord tells the people, gird yourselves and ye shall be broken in pieces. And it repeats it three times. Gird yourselves and ye shall be broken in pieces. Basically saying, girding up your loins is taking your robe and tying it through the girdle so that you can run. And so it's saying, if you go to war, you're going to be destroyed. And in the coming day, when the Assyrian invades, if you go to war, you're going to be destroyed. It also warns us, Isaiah also warns us not to be confederate with Egypt, which if you look at the United States, if Isaiah saw the United States in vision, he'd be like, well, these guys, they're like Egypt. They carry around pyramids on money in their wallets, and they have obelisks in their big city, and so if we sign up to be part of the war, if we go to battle, we're going to get cut down, we're going to be destroyed. There aren't going to be very many men left. So your neighbor is very wise to ask this question, because it has been prophesied that there won't be very many men left. So what do you do? Well, I hate to make this a plug for Dwelt, even though it's the Dwelt podcast, but the number one thing is faith in the Lord Jesus Christ. Number two is distance. You have to get distance between yourself and the populace. You have to get distance between yourself and the drug kingpin. If you don't do that, you're at risk. Now, there is something scripturally that, and I hate to just, dive into the scriptures, but I think there's a lot of context here. We have been promised protection in the stakes of Zion, in the stakes. So if you think about a tent, the way that you secure the tent is by stakes. Stakes hold the tent down. What does a tent do? It protects you from the sun. It protects you from the rain, the snow, the wind. And so the stakes help the church protect the people. So remain faithful. Align yourselves with the stakes of Zion. If you can create distance between yourself and populace, you should do that. And of course, along with the stakes of Zion comes comes community. And so those are, I mean, it's the big three for Dwelt align perfectly with the answer to this question. Now with your spouse being alone, let's say, you get called on a mission, or you get called to war, or you die, or whatever plague gets released, targets men in their 30s, 40s, and 50s. In fact, Isaiah also talks, and you've heard about this, that in that day, 7 women will go to one man and say, take away our reproach. Just let us, we'll provide for ourselves. Just let us use your name. And so, yes, men will be sparse, and there won't be many left. And so the first 3 things with Dwelt, for sure. The other thing that they need to do is be an asset beyond being used as an object. So my wife, she knows how to take care of goats and produce and, collect the goat milk. And so that's a huge asset. She knows how to train horses. She knows how to process cows. She knows how to raise and process chickens. And while things might be dangerous for every woman that's out there, a woman with skills to help people survive is going to be precious as well. So that's what I would say. I would say get some distance, obviously align yourself with the stakes, align yourself with a community that can provide the security and protection, monitoring that you need, so that, somebody can sleep while somebody's sitting in the crow's nest watching for invaders coming and defending the land. Like, that community is so important. Those are the answers or the conclusions that we've come to. And I would recommend people look to ways to do that. Chris, you mentioned being able to fight and shoot a gun and stuff like that. I think those are great resources. But also household things. I mean, how many young women know how to prepare meals? How many young women know how to grind wheat and make flour? Those rudimentary skills, or those foundational skills, will be incredibly important in coming days. And I think that's the best way to prepare.
The drug kingpin will likely be hungry. So if you can make him some food or
There you
grow
go.
him some food, he'll be pretty happy.
Yeah.
That answer kind of goes to another question we had, which is, are we to presume that in order for God to protect his people, they need to have all these supplies and vehicles and animals and land? And they said, well, will the righteous people just perish because they couldn't afford that, or they can't do that? And obviously the answer is no. God can do anything he wants, and he'll protect his people to whatever degree he feels is right. But you also mentioned the stake thing, and I think that addresses this question as well.
I think it kind of does. But something funny happened in the last couple of weeks. One of my friends was in sacrament meeting up in South Jordan, and President Oaks walks into the chapel and sits through sacrament meeting. And he takes the mic 5 minutes before the end of the meeting, and he says, hey, I'm going to speak on something that hasn't been spoken of in a long time in general conference. I'm not going to tell you what it is, but I'm going to speak on something that hasn't been spoken of in a long time. And going through the other conference talks, 2 other people are talking about the same topic. Well, my friend texted this to me firsthand, and I trust him. And then the rumor's spreading, right? So one of my brothers, I shared it with my brothers. And then just yesterday, they texted me and they said, hey, here it is on Facebook and on this other podcast. People are sharing that this happened with President Oaks. What do you think it could be? And on the podcast, they're like, maybe he's going to talk about temporal preparedness. And I'm like, we have been talked to about temporal preparedness over and over and over again. I think in one of the other episodes, I shared the talk from Elder Bednar in 2020 during COVID, where he's like, you have to be temporarily prepared. The repeated counsel is like a symphony. It's not a single note. It's been over and over for the past 150 years or whatever. Be prepared, be prepared. And so can you really say I'm righteous if you're not following that counsel of the prophets? If you're not following that command of being prepared? I mean, I would say, just like any other effort to be righteous, you do everything that you can, and the Lord will fill in the blanks through the power of the atonement, essentially. And so what does that look like? Well, maybe that looks like selling your iPad and getting a few buckets of wheat. Maybe it means doing a staycation instead of going to Disneyland and use that money to buy some sugar and store up. I think there are a lot of things that we do as a society that we're like, oh yeah, we went to Lake Powell this year, we went to Disneyland this year, or I got my new iPhone, just all these things that, yes, you can create great memories, all that kind of stuff, but won't you regret having those memories and not having food and watching your kids starve and suffer? So I think there's a lot that we should be doing that we're not doing, that we've been told to do over and over and over again. Be righteous, we should follow that counsel. Now, will the Lord abandon his people? No. Over and over and over again, he says, I'll gather you like a chicken gathereth her chicks under her wings, right? I will make my arm bare to protect you. And so, yes, we are going to go through at least 3.5 years of major persecution, probably even a siege. And it's going to be really, really bad, but the Lord will deliver us. And so, again, dwelt, stakes of Zion, living righteously, following the prophet's advice. That's what we need to do.
Yeah, I completely lost that thought. So we'll just go to the next one.
Well, I was just going to add to that I know Elder Holland has spoke about this a lot, that we are on the winning team. So we want to be on the winning team, right? And we know the outcome. And so we definitely want to just make sure that we're, as you mentioned, doing number one, having faith in Christ and be on his side. And then I feel like you can be confident that no matter how it plays out, like you're going to be okay. Your family's going to be taken care of.
Yeah, you do what you can. I remember what I was going to say. I've been having those moments lately where I'm making decisions about the future and now, and it's a real like gut check. Like, do I really believe that this is going to happen soon or not? Because like my decisions are going to be very different if I believe it. But similarly, like you said, that the leaders have been warning us for a long, long, long time. And so I can ask the same question. Do I really believe that they're called by God? Because if I do, then I should probably start doing the things that they told me to do and prepare.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I mean, and then you, like you said, you do what you can. You do the best you can with what you have, and then God will take care of the rest.
Yeah, I do want to call out our modern habits again. I shared on Twitter, I don't know, maybe a week ago, this, I can't remember her name. I think it's Shannon something. She's the ayahuasca chick that's got like all these piercings and all this stuff. And I quoted Isaiah chapter 3 in my post, the mantles, wimples, and crisping pins and stuff like that. And I mean, I don't know what she's going through personally or how she might be used by the modern day Gadiantans to push a message forward, which is probably the case. But it reminds me of Isaiah chapter 28, where if you go back and read it, woe is pronounced to the drunkards of Ephraim. And it doesn't say that they're drunk on wine. It says they're drunk on pride. And then it says their wine is their pride. So they're drunk on pride. And it talks about how they are going to be like a fading flower and a overripe fruit, so that they're going to be rotten and the flower is going to wilt, and they live in these fat valleys, but it says the tables are full of vomit and filthiness because of what they're doing. And that chapter is actually one where I think the Lord tells Isaiah of a potential EMP in the last days. So that's a good one to review. That's Isaiah chapter 28. Check that out. And then, the scourge that's coming and the challenges that are ahead of us are pretty stark. Now, the Lord does deliver, and he refers to verse 21, the Lord shall rise up as in Mount Perazim, and he shall be wroth as in the valley of Gibeon, where he may do his work, his strange work, and bring to pass his strange act. If you study on those things, there's some pretty cool things that are prophesied to happen as far as destroying our enemies. So yes, we will suffer. We will be beaten by our enemies, but eventually he will step in. And those battles at Perazim and the Valley of Gibeon, the Lord just wiped out the opposing forces. Israel woke up one morning and all the bad guys were dead in one of them. The other one, flaming, hailstones came down and destroyed the opposing army. So pretty crazy things are ahead, but we have to watch out for that pride and that, that focus on the worldly things, the Babylonian things, because man, we're going to suffer the more we focus on that.
You brought it up, so I'm going right into one of these questions we got. Someone said, 3 Nephi 21:14. I'll read it. Yea, woe be unto the Gentiles, except they repent. For it shall come to pass in that day, saith the Father, that I will cut off thy horses out of the midst of thee, and I will destroy thy chariots. They wanted to know if we thought that's an EMP. I mean,
Well,
it could be. It could be a lot of things, though.
Yeah, that's Micah chapter 5, which I think I brought up. The Lord is either quoting Micah chapter 5 or referring to Micah chapter 5, where he says, horses, chariots, and cities will all be destroyed. In going back to Isaiah chapter 28, it does say, this is kind of interesting. So verse 2, I'll read it. Behold, the Lord hath a mighty and strong one, which as a tempest of hail and a destroying storm, as a flood of mighty waters overflowing, shall cast down to the earth with the hand. So the imagery there is that something is cast down to the earth by the hand of probably men, because it doesn't say the hand of God. So something will be cast down, and it will be a tempest of hail, a destroying storm. And actually, if you look at the Hebrew on it, it uses the word, pardon my French, or pardon my Hebrew, it uses the word piss, that it'll piss down from above. And, the hailstorm is mentioned over and over and over again, destroying the crops of the earth and causing a famine. And that one's kind of interesting because if a hailstorm swept across the heartland of the U.S. and destroyed all the crops, I mean, the U.S. heartland produces like a ridiculous percentage of the food for the whole earth. And so all it would have to do is wipe out the heartland. Now the heartland's good or big, so it'd have to be a pretty big storm. But anyway, I think this kind of drives the imagery of an EMP. And then if you scroll down or look down in Isaiah 28, he talks about the scourge that comes through. And it says in verse 19, from the time that it goeth forth, it shall take you. From morning by morning, it shall pass over, by day and by night, and it shall be a vexation only to understand the report. So even to hear about it, you're going to be vexed. You're going to be upset. And then it says, for the bed is shorter than a man can stretch himself on it, and the covering narrower than he can wrap himself in it. So you won't be able to rest. You won't be able to sleep comfortably even because of this thing that's coming. And then, it goes on to talk about in 22, the consumption, which we've heard over and over again, the consumption decreed will fill the earth. And kind of sounds like an EMP. Now, you guys will think I'm a little bit weird, but I have a hard time believing that a man-made EMP is possible. I've read about it. I've watched all the YouTube videos, and the idea of an EMP is it's an electromagnetic pulse that lights off and like a high-level nuclear bomb explodes and goes through the atmosphere and fries all the electronics on the whole hemisphere, right? I have a hard, my small brain can't fathom that. Like, I've seen lightning. There's a ridiculous amount of energy between the static of the clouds and the land. And so lightning strikes off, and lightning doesn't spread out and cascade indefinitely. So I'm having a hard time imagining that guys can light off a nuclear bomb high in the atmosphere and it's going to fry all the electronics. Any thoughts on that? I mean, Chris, where are you at on the EMP thing?
I mean, my thoughts on this are going to be crazier than yours, so I don't know if you want me to share them. But
Yeah, let's hear it.
I get into the stuff that Leland Tanner talks about with planets coming back and realigning, Saturn joining our sky again, and you
Yeah.
think of the destruction that something like that could cause. I mean, again, I said this last episode, we're once again having to assume that space is real for a minute. But
Yeah.
if space is real and Saturn comes into our sky and is close to us again, and other planets for that matter, like many believe was the case in ancient times.
Yeah, with the
then that would
Mars and
cause-
Venus concentric circles and stuff like that. Yeah.
Yeah, and there's pretty good evidence for it. And actually, if you look at canyons and some of these like huge geographical features, they look like lightning strikes from
Yeah.
an aerial shot.
That's true.
It's this whole idea of cataclysm where the Earth isn't billions of years old. There were just giant catastrophes that happened, mostly due to these planetary movements, and that's what caused so many of the things we see. But all things are going to be restored in the last days, and so if that's the case, that's how it used to be, that's how it will be again. And I mean, even if you want to get into planets not moving, like let's just say the city of Enoch has to come back from somewhere. And I don't know what that looks like, but that could cause a lot of problems. So I think there's explanations for these things that we like our science doesn't answer right now.
Yeah, and I'll buy that. I'll totally buy that. But I have a really hard time believing that a high level nuke into the atmosphere can cascade electricity down and fry all the electronics and burn people and stuff like that. Maybe it's possible, maybe it isn't. Regardless of whether or not I believe it's possible, man-made EMP, I still have a cyberdeck, which is an offline copy of the internet, not the internet, but everything that you would want to know, in a Faraday cage, in a shipping container. I haven't put it in a microwave yet, but it's fairly robust. I have radios in a Faraday bag. I have some batteries and solar chargers in Faraday bags. And so I have a little bit set aside just in case that happens. But I have neighbors who have hardened their vehicles, hardened their electrical system for their house, all that kind of stuff. And actually, we're going to try to get one of the world's foremost experts on the podcast to talk about hardening your electronics, putting in redundancy. And some of those kits are pretty inexpensive. I think it's like $40 and you can buy a hardening kit for your vehicle and install it on your battery. And supposedly they work pretty well. Do you guys remember the movie Oceans? Oh, go ahead, Dan.
I don't even know what a Faraday bag is. So maybe you can fill me in on that. Is that step one?
Yeah. So the idea with the Faraday bag, I appreciate the question. The idea with a Faraday bag is if you create a container out of metal and an EMP or electromagnetic pulse comes and hits that container, it's going to hit the surface and go around it. And so whatever's inside of it is insulated from that. And so there are people that turn their shipping containers into Faraday boxes, Faraday cages. You've probably seen the image of Tesla sitting in a Faraday cage where there's like lightning bolts coming off of his Tesla generators, and he's sitting in this cage like perfectly fine. That's what the Faraday hardening is about. And then these Faraday kits that you buy for your car, they create the circuit, but then they have, I forget what they're called. I should know this right off the top of my head. But they have little things that will get fried instead of your car's electrical system getting fried.
Cool. Thank you.
Here's the picture of Tesla.
Okay, yeah.
I'll just say real quick that this is a good example of just preparation in general. Like you don't even think an EMP can happen.
Sorry,
you're
guys.
still preparing for it and getting ready.
Yeah.
Mitch is on Starlink, so You can blame Elon
Yes.
if there's any
Yeah.
delays.
Sorry about that. You guys got me back. I think I'm back now.
Yep, you're back. You're good.
Yeah.
You didn't
It's
miss
like
much.
when
I
you're
was
driving.
just saying.
Oh, go ahead.
Okay,
Almost
I'll
back.
go. It's I was just saying that this is a good example of preparation where you don't even believe an EMP can happen, and yet you're still doing these things just in case to prepare
Yeah.
for it.
Yeah, I would say, and you'll hear me say this all the time, I'm probably wrong about all this stuff, right? The chances are that I'm wrong about what Isaiah is talking about in the scriptures. I'm wrong about what's happening in the world today. Like, it's okay. I'm okay with being wrong, but I also really like the idea that even if I'm wrong, I still live a great lifestyle. We feel like we're more self-reliant than ever. We have better food quality than we've ever had before. I get out and work outside more than I ever have. And it's a great life. It's a great lifestyle. So yeah, I'm probably wrong, but even if I'm wrong, I'm still prepared.
I think
Awesome.
that's the way to do it. Okay, more questions? You good with that? This
Yeah,
one,
let's
this one will be
let's shoot.
quick. Potential of an on-site airstrip at Dwelt. We've never talked about it. I know there's communities like that.
I saw
out
that.
there.
Yeah.
I saw that post, and that's a really cool idea. In fact, one of my best friends wanted to buy land near me down here in Sanpete County, and that was one of his criteria. He needed a piece of land that was long enough to put a runway in, and we found one. And actually, on my property here, which is not the Dwelt location, on my property, you could definitely land a plane and well, it depends on the size of the plane, but you could definitely get in and out. The first Dwelt location here in Sanpete, we have a number of options on land. And so one of the pieces of land, it's not likely. But on one of the other pieces of land, it is a possibility. I think the question is, as we design these Dwelt locations, and by the way, one of the frequently asked questions is, where is Dwelt? And the answer to that is, Dwelt is going to be all across the US, 50 miles from population centers. So we have them lined up for Utah, central Utah. We have them lined up for Arizona. We're working on Texas and Oklahoma right now. We have them lined up in Missouri. That's kind of the start. And it's a little bit of bias based on the horseshoe prophecy. If you guys haven't seen the horseshoe prophecy, you can Google it. It's apocryphal. It probably isn't real, but just in case it is real, we're designing Dwelt locations along that route. The basic premise is that some guy had his mom tell him that a prophet who stayed at her house during a conference told her that when the Saints go back to Missouri, they won't go straight back the way they came. They'll go back in the form of a U, almost going down to Mexico and then back up to Missouri. And so in my weirdness, one Saturday, I sat down and said, all right, let's map this out. We want a maximum of 30 miles between surface water or groundwater, spring location, which, we want it to surface. 30 miles between surface water going all the way from Dwelt location number 1 in central Utah down through Arizona, cutting through the corner of New Mexico down to near the Mexico border in Texas, and then back up through Oklahoma and into Missouri. And I made the map, and it's probably one that we'll publish at some point publicly on Dwelt. But Dwelt members will have it, and Dwelt members will become familiar with the route. In fact, I'm driving that route later this month with a few of my friends to go check out the different water sources, and just kind of a fun thing for us to do. So anyway, Dwelt is all across the U.S., and I'm sure plenty of the properties will have room for landing a plane. I also think, the Eisenhower highway system was designed for that specifically. Like, I don't know if you've looked into this, but every so many miles, there has to be a straight enough place that a plane can land. And so I think there will be plenty of options on unpopulated roads that you could land a plane on, especially after, grid goes down and fuel delivery goes down and stuff like that.
And we just talked about that all of the roads are going to be unpopulated because the horses and the chariots aren't going to work. So no problem.
It's funny. I've got friends who are like, yep, I've got my fifth wheel. I've got my diesel truck. I've got spare fuel. I'll just drive to Missouri. And then I pull out Micah chapter 5 and I'm like, I don't think you're going to be driving to Missouri. And so I have one of my friends and we'll have him on this podcast that puts together, makes some recommendations on inch bags. I don't know if you guys heard of inch bags. Inch is INCH. It stands for I'm never coming home. So an I'm never coming home bag is a bag that you leave home and you're like, okay, this is how I live now. And you got to have shelter and you got to have tools and you got to be able to carry it all on your back or in a hand cart. And I believe that the roads will be impassable and or deteriorated enough that we won't be driving back to Missouri. We get to walk. So that'll be fun.
Well, and to that, I had an experience last summer that really sunk it deep into my mind of that possibility. I went to it was in the Heber area, and there was an accident by like Highway 40 where the freeways meet kind of up by Jordanelle Reservoir. And it stopped traffic everywhere. Like it backed it up on Highway 40 all the way over to I-80. Like it was just jammed with cars because there's nowhere to go, right? Like there's not even exit points on a lot of those roads. And so if you think that you're going to be able to drive anywhere, you're not. I mean, you're just going to be stuck in traffic. Even if you can get a little bit, right? You're just going to be jammed up. And so I remember thinking, wow, like this is a prime example of how one accident can trigger a ripple effect of traffic jams everywhere. So imagine if you times that by 10 or 20 and there's accidents all over the place because of whatever, an earthquake or floods or whatever is happening. We're going to need to find a way to manage where we're at.
And this goes
back to that's a good. Go ahead,
I was
Chris.
going to say this goes back to the idea that you need to get out quick. You need to be observing what's happening and make your move before everybody else makes their move.
Yeah. There is a vision recorded in Wilford Woodruff's journal. And Wilford Woodruff records it in the first person, but scholars have gone back and said, well, this is actually John Taylor because it talks about this vision that he has while he's studying the Gospels in French. And they're like, Wilford Woodruff didn't speak French, but John Taylor did. Anyway, the John Taylor prophecy, you can Google that. He saw all these crazy things happening, but one of the things that he saw was women walking, trying to get to Utah, walking across the middle of America, the heartland, just in their business clothes with a knapsack over their shoulder, just trying to get out of Dodge and get to Utah where there were resources. And it's a pretty stark thing. You guys both know that. So my commute has been a 70-mile commute. And so I leave the farm and I drive 50 to 70 miles to get to the office, depending on which way I go. And I always carry my go bag with me so that if an EMP happened or earthquake happened or anything else happened, I've got my walking shoes for the summer, my walking shoes for the winter, coat, pants, everything that I would need to survive to get back home. And that includes going to my adult children's homes on the way and getting them and my grandchildren and saying, okay, here's the plan to get out of here and get to the farm. And so, Dan, I would say every vehicle should have all the things that you would need to be able to walk back home or walk to a stake center or a place of safety or walk to your dwelt location in case of an emergency.
Yeah, definitely.
someone asked, this is sort of related, but they asked, like you just said 70 miles, and that's the exact number they use. So if your bug out spot or your dwell location is 70 miles away and you're going to have to walk there, what's stopping everybody else from walking there? And my initial reaction is, well, they're not going to know where you're walking, first of all. Like, they're not going to go walking 70 miles hungry and hope that they like run into some community in the middle of Utah. Like, they could get lost way too easily. And then, like, I hate to say it, but things are going to be so crazy in a densely populated area that if you don't get out early, or at least have a plan to get out, like, good luck. It's just going to be too chaotic, in my opinion.
Yeah, and that's. Oh, go ahead,
I
Dan.
was just going to say, we saw that during COVID, right? Like, I remember the first week it hit, it was chaos everywhere. And that was just from knowledge of a pandemic, right? So just imagine the chaos with anything else. Anyway, so we've experienced it.
You remember the earthquake that happened where the statue Moroni on Salt Lake Temple dropped the trumpet? When that happened, I had a coworker whose husband ran the oil refinery up north of Salt Lake, and she texted and said the earthquake has disrupted the oil refinery, and they have a shutdown and restart procedure that's going to impact fuel for the next few weeks. And so I left my house, drove to the fuel station, filled up every gas can that I could. And everybody's like, oh, that's hoarding. You shouldn't do that. Everybody else needs that fuel. But I already had a plan. I already had a plan of where to go and what I needed to do. And so I'm like, I got to get out and get the fuel and get to my place of refuge before I have to battle with anybody to get out of here. And so I show up at the Walmart gas station that was by my house, and I'm filling up these gas cans, and guys are coming over. They're like, oh, you going to Moab this weekend? Are you going out on the dunes? And I'm like, yeah, buddy. Yep. That's what I'm doing.
Yeah.
But yeah. And so that's the beauty of having a designated place to go that you already love, because you've built it, you've spent time there, you've created memories there with your family. And so when something happens, it's like, boom, let's go. Immediately. We don't have to sit around and figure out. We don't have to watch the news to see what they say. It's like 3 hours max, and we're out of here. That's the beauty of having that dwell location. That's one of the reasons why I was like, okay, we need to start dwell, because I've always had a place to go to. Thankfully, my great grandpa, my dad, they own land up in the mountains that I knew where I was going to go in case of an emergency. My grandma had a dream that calamity struck, and we all headed to the mountains to that property. So I always had a place to go. And then starting the farm that I'm on now, and realizing, okay, there are certain resources here that we're going to use. Again, same thing, super easy to go to. And then throughout this whole time, the other big thing is developing skills. And that's one thing that we want to do with Dwelt, is help people gain the skills of gardening, of animal husbandry, of security, of communications, of survival, of things like midwifery and basic medical care. We want to have those skills in the community, and that individually over time, over the next few years, if we have a few years, you can begin developing those skills on location at Dwelt, and know who you're going to be with, so that when something happens, you get ahead of that crowd.
And that's also the point of the guides, is if you can't be on location at Dwelt, well, we're going to have like a ton of guides to help you learn those skills too.
Yeah, we actually had. Yeah,
Oh,
somebody's like,
ahead,
"Hey, when's the first guide available?"
Yeah. It's soon. The first guide is available soon. It's almost done, from what I understand. So the content is done. It's just being put together. So related to this, someone said, if a bug out is not possible, or like someone gets hurt, or there's a medical condition, you can't get out, what do you do? And I think this is the answer. Like, you need to, right now, you should be learning the things you need to know to survive, basically.
Yeah, and there's an entirely different consideration with bugging in. Even simple things like making it look like nobody's home. Don't turn the lights on. Don't go in and out of the house. Like, leave under the cover of darkness and return under the cover of darkness, because the gangs will be going door to door and they'll smash your door in. And so you got to be prepared for that. Unfortunately, a lot of people who bug in are going to have to defend their family with their lives, and they're going to have to be willing to take lives. I had an experience that I was at the office years ago, and we had let somebody go, and they showed up the next day and they were angry, red in the face. They came into my office without me really being prepared, and it caught me off guard. Now, I'm a fairly large dude, and have been fairly fit most of my life and have a little bit of training. And so I immediately was aware of the situation and how bad it was. My only route of escape was through this guy. Fortunately, it didn't turn violent, and I was able to talk the guy down a little bit. But after that, I had to decide, should I start carrying a firearm as I leave the house? And that was a pretty heavy decision, because if you're going to do that, you have to be willing to use it in the case that you need to use it. And I struggled with that for a while. Like, am I willing to take somebody's life for my safety? Probably not. But for the safety of others, that's a tough thing to decide. And I'm not going to share what I decided on this publicly broadcasted podcast, but I would say that type of emotional preparation and mental preparation is just as important as the other preparation that you're doing. Like, you got to be prepared. If you're going to bug in, you got to be prepared to do some pretty heinous things in order to survive. I would much rather, the guy that tweeted this also said, I think I've got it pulled up. Let me pull it up. He was like, maybe this is a great plug for Dwelt. Let's see. Yeah, this is Kenyon Pope. And he's like, is this a perfect setup to plug Dwelt? And honestly, Kenyon, that's very astute of you. I think it is, because I would way rather bug out and be part of a community that shares the shared responsibility of security and protection than have to do that on your own, in your house, in the city, where the drug kingpin, where your neighbors, where everybody else is coming around wanting what you've got. And so, yeah, think of the peace of mind that you'll have being in a place where somebody else is taking their turn on security, somebody else is taking their turn on the homestead and with the livestock and the food supply. And then you've got that huge asset of the distance between you and the population centers, where you can people actually are going to have to walk to try to take stuff. And can you imagine them getting enough people to attack a community of people who are prepared for an attack? That's pretty unfathomable at this point. So yes, get a Dwelt membership and go to Dwelt when everything hits the fan.
If you do have to bug in, another thing I'll add is that before things go bad, get very familiar with your immediate location. You're obviously familiar with your house, but even a little broader than that, because your advantage is going to be that you're on home turf. Like you mentioned, the drug kingpin coming and kicking your door down. He doesn't know what he's going to see once the door's down, though, and you do. So
Yeah.
You have an advantage by knowing that kind of stuff. The other thing I'll say, we're going to end up with like a Dwelt podcast bingo, because I think I've brought Clay Martin up in every episode. But Clay Martin has 2 books. One is called Prairie Fire, and one is, I think, Concrete Jungle, I think. You should read those, because Prairie Fire is great for Dwelt if you have some space between you and other people and what you're going to need to do. But Concrete Jungle is really good to tell you how to get out. Like, you gotta if you're in a populated area, then your number one objective is to get out, and it has a lot of good advice for that. So recommend those 2 books.
Yeah. Just be prepared for a lot of cussing as you read those books.
That's
He gets
true.
pretty-
I was gonna say, like,
pretty
we gotta
vivid.
get him on the podcast at this point, but he Clay has quite the creative language. So
Okay, so just another comment about the drug kingpins. I've spent some time in West Africa, in Liberia, and Liberia suffered through 13 years of civil war. And the child soldiers and the warlords and all of that stuff happened in Liberia. And it got super gross, super weird, just really bad. In my humanitarian work in the country, I got to go meet with former warlords and former child soldiers and kind of understand a little bit of what they were doing and why they were doing it, and the atrocities that were committed. And it breaks reality. I mean, think about what happened in Haiti last week, and everybody was posting about this guy who's a cannibal and basically a warlord. This kind of stuff does happen in some places around the world, usually in societal collapse. But in Liberia during the Civil War, they were taking kids and giving them a mixture of cocaine and gunpowder. That's what these kids were on. And they told me, I mean, they're in their 20s when I was meeting with them, and the Civil War had passed, 10 years prior. And I'm asking them, like, what's going through your mind? And they're like, dude, when you're on cocaine and gunpowder, you are a machine. Like, nothing can stop you. Everything looks fake. There's no atrocity off the table. They're like, we treated people like animals, like just like you would, I don't know, shoot a dog that's attacking your child. We would shoot people and do horrible things to them. I won't even get into it in this podcast, but we think, oh yeah, they're going to come knock on your door and try to take your cans of wheat or whatever. That's not what's going to happen. They're going to do really, really bad things, and you'll be begging them to take your wheat and begging them to take your guns, just so that they'll leave. And it's going to be really, really not cool. And so that's another reason why it's like, I think distance is that second most important thing, so you can avoid some of those travesties that are going to happen. Chris mentioned a couple episodes ago, things are about to get weird. And I think that's on the macro level, but it's also on the micro level, where you have neighbors who you love and revere who will show up and slit your throat for whatever reason.
I hear a lot of people will be like, well, but there's only good people in my neighborhood and everybody likes each other and there won't be any problems. And I always say, like, yeah, right now, but if they need to feed their kids, you're not their friend anymore.
Yeah.
If their kids are starving to
Yeah.
death and you're the one with food, you're not the friend anymore. So yeah,
Yeah.
things are going to get weird.
Yep. I call that
we have
I call that just real quick. I call that, and we can I'll expound on this at a later show, but I call that the season of the heretic, where when you consider someone else a heretic, what are you allowed to do, or what are you justified in doing? If they are a heretic and they're destroying society or destroying your family, you're going to cut off their head. That's what they've done to heretics since time began. And so if they've got food and they're not sharing their food with you, and your kid's starving, you're going to be willing to cut their head off. And you want to avoid that, being in that situation.
I need to do like an Alex Jones rant right now about how I'm going to eat my neighbor. I don't have
Just
the
don't
energy.
put it the
I
way
don't have
he
like
put
the
it.
Alex Jones energy to do it, but yeah. Okay, there are 4 more prepping questions that I think we can very quickly get through. Number 1 is, do you have any priorities in terms of technology that you should be getting right now to be prepared? I would say a ham radio, like, because you want to talk to people. And this came up, I think, talking to you, Mitch, was that's great. But if I'm communicating with someone and I'm like, hey, this is where I am, now they know where to come. So don't just
Yeah.
get the radio, but like have a way have a plan to talk to people in a way that no one else will know what you're talking about.
Yeah, if you're telling them, hey, let's meet at 1200 hours at location B, nobody knows where that is. But if you're like, yeah, come on down to Manti, Utah, we've got resources for you.
Yeah.
Everybody's coming. Yeah.
I have 10,
if you're in
10 cows and 10 goats at this location this week.
Yeah.
There's going to be plenty for everybody.
my little community, we're just getting into Meshtastic. I don't know if you've heard of Meshtastic, but if you're into technology, Meshtastic, sorry, is a personal mesh network that you can set up. It's on open source hardware and software, and so you can buy Meshtastic devices, connect them to a small battery and a solar panel, and you can text messages across that network. And so let's say, you've got a friend that's on the other side of Utah Valley. So you've got a friend in Provo and you're in, I don't know, Lehigh. You could hide Meshtastic devices between you and them, and they go 5 miles. So you're, 3 Meshtastic devices, and you can send messages across that network back and forth to your friend, and it's a secured messaging system. Probably only the government or the military would be able to crack that. Most home users wouldn't be able to. The challenge with that is if it's an EMP, then it's useless because all of those devices that you put along the way are just going to get fried. But if it's not an EMP, if it's an earthquake or an invasion or economic collapse, anything like that, or even a localized problem, skirmish that breaks out or whatever, you can still send messages across a Meshtastic network. There's another device called Gotana. Gotana Mesh was the product. They were making it for backpackers, and it worked so well that the military picked it up and started using it in Iraq and Afghanistan. And it's the same thing as Meshtastic, except for it's like $50 a unit. You can get them on eBay. They don't sell them publicly anymore from Gotana, and the software doesn't work. The app is not available on iPhone, so you have to be on Android and have the APK to install. But Gotana is it's almost like the Apple of Meshtastic. It's super easy to use. It's easy to configure. So I've been buying those and setting up a mesh network that I can use, or I can set it to public. So other Gotana users can hop on that mesh network and send messages as well. So those are 2 technical options for communications that are pretty cool. Another technology device that you may not consider as technology is a water filter. I'd make sure that you've got a water filter. And we need to talk about my poll that I put on X and what people responded to on that. But water filter is a great one to have. We've already talked about Faraday bags, and I'm not technical enough. I didn't have enough time to figure out how to make my own CyberDeck. The CyberDeck is a small self-contained computer that runs on an a Raspberry Pi, not an apple pie, Raspberry Pi, and you can load content on it. And so I've loaded up. I can't remember what they call it. It's like the ARC or something like that, and it's like all of Wikipedia, every military manual that there is, every surgical manual that's publicly available, foraging guides, literally. I think it's like 0.5 terabyte of guides, so that if everything collapsed, I'd be able to pull up my little computer and say, okay, we need to do surgery on this dog. Here's how we're going to do it. And we'd have the guides to be able to make that happen. That was kind of a fun one from a technological standpoint. And that's, if you got time or money to play around with, that's kind of a fun one. I do agree with your comment about ham radios. Now, those are the first ones that come to mind.
Another one I'll add is drones. I think drones could be useful for a variety of things, scouting and defending yourself. Another cool thing I've heard is setting up the security cameras, like from Ring Doorbell or whatever, Amazon, whoever makes those wireless security cameras. You can set them up all around your property so you can kind of see what's going on assuming you have enough electricity to do it, you can see what's going on around the property.
Yeah, I've got a friend of mine. Let me see if I can find it real quick. He builds security cameras for a living, and let me see if I can find the brand. I was messing around with one of his. This brand has a ton of. Oh, it's called Reolink, Reolank. You can buy them with solar panels, with cell service. So even if you're remote, you can still have the signal beam to you. It does on cloud recording. They're pretty inexpensive. And I think it doesn't even require a monthly subscription. Pretty cool devices. Reolank. Yeah, that's a good idea. And even trail cams that you can put up for security purposes.
Yeah, that would be great too. If anybody knows the best technology to listen to music when the world is gone, I would love to know that. Is it just
It's
a
called
record
Learn the
player?
Guitar.
There, yeah, I love music, and I would love to be able to listen to like a Lord Huron album. And if I just have to buy the records of everything, then so be it. Like I'll do it. But
Dude, I'd say records are your best bet. I mean, records sound quality is more pure and better and stuff like that. There's a whole movement to get physical media, even if it's like CDs or cassette tapes or DVDs. It's a whole movement you can tap into on Reddit or TikTok of physical media. Guys are like, if they find something online, they'll quickly rip it and make a physical backup of it. But I would say records are probably your best bet for audio because you can get manual crank phonographs off of Temu or Wish or Alibaba if you want, and they're certainly on Amazon. And then you could also get battery powered ones as well. So it's a good idea, Chris.
I just
to have
think,
something like that.
yeah, I mean, we sit here and talk about all the ways we're gonna like get food and water and defend ourselves, but like the amount of quality of life it's gonna like multiply by 10 if you can listen to a song every once in a while. Like I think
Yeah.
it's important to think of some things that are like gonna bring joy too, I guess is what I'm saying.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, last year when I was sick, a business vendor of mine sent me a joke book, and I sat there and bawled and bawled and bawled when I opened it up. It's an Amazon package, and I'm laying in bed, I can't really do anything. Then I open it up, and it's a joke book, and I was just like, yeah, I need some just mindless laughter right now, and it was such a great gift. I think you're dead on. The ability to laugh, to sing, to dance, to tell stories, and put on little shows. You remember the church used to do the old road shows. That kind of stuff is really enriching, and we're going to need a lot of that, especially if TikTok is not available, and this whole generation of humanity is like raised on TikTok. We're going to need some entertainment.
Yeah, you want to keep morale up. Low morale is going to be a problem. So, okay, cool.
I've got a question here. That's a couple of questions about survival, and then we got to get into my poll results. Somebody said, Dad Bod Coog said top 20 items to have in a 72-hour bug out bag. Dan, you've got the 72-hour kits. You want to kick us off with that and tell us what you've got in there?
Oh, yeah, it's making me realize that I need to go review them. But because my wife was awesome and she was the one that was like making the list and like getting it all together. But with that said, I do know that we have the ham radios in there, at least two. And then I think I mentioned this on one of the other episodes, but just, I mean, basics like matches, a lighter, maybe waterproof matches, or at least seal them up somehow. Definitely think you like simple things like a Sharpie, maybe a marker, a pen, and a notepad, just in case you need to write something down and like leave notes for anybody. Because you got to kind of think basic and analog, right? I think you definitely need some food in there that's going to last for a while. So at the very least, to like get you by for a few days until you can maybe get to another place with more. So those meals ready to eat or the freeze dried type meals and foods would be good. What are some other things? To me, like having a pair of gloves would be nice. Like just if you're working on stuff or you need to um, repair things, I don't know, having those would be good. First aid kit, definitely with the basics in there. Basics like ibuprofen, aspirin, um, maybe Tylenol, some of those basic medications. And then I would say um, you could even consider putting some things in there like vitamins. And then um, you mentioned having a water filter, which I think is critical. So we definitely have some of those in there. I think is it Life Straw, the brand that it's pretty common.
Yeah.
Where it's lightweight and pretty compact, which I thought was pretty nice. So those are some of the main ones that I'm thinking of pretty quickly.
I like that. There's a survival expert by the name of Dave Canterbury. He was on a TV show for a few years, and I kind of started following him. And he has the 10 C's of survival. And it's the 10 C's or 10 categories of things that you should have in your pack. And I'll just run through them real quick. Dan, you touched on pretty much most of them. The first C is a cutting tool. And he recommends redundancy. And my wife gives me a hard time because I always say, well, two is one and one is none. And so whenever I'm buying something, I'm like, well, if I buy one, it's going to fail. So I need two. And then if I have two, well, I probably should have three just in case. And so anyway, so with the cutting tool, he's, you're thinking like an axe or a saw or a knife. But definitely a knife, a good bush knife. The second C is combustion device. So you mentioned waterproof matches. He's talking multiple ways, like a ferrosterium rod, matches, lighters, things like that. Number 3 is cover. So tent, tarp, wool blanket, that kind of stuff. Number 3 is container. And not just any container, but it should be a metal container, a single wall metal container that's unlined and uncoated. Why do you need a container? Well, to put water in, either your filtered water or to boil water. And so it should be able to be something that you can just put on the fire, boil that water. Yes, to purify it, but also if you have freeze-dried meals or something like that, you're going to need a container to heat up that water. Number 5 is cordage. So paracord is a super popular one. There's survival cordage that is paracord that also has like a wick in it. It has some wire for trapping. As I camp and spend a lot of times outdoors, I use cordage all the time. 6 is cotton bandana. So this would be like a schmog. You can wrap it around your head. You can put it in water and use it as an air conditioner as you're walking in the heat. 3x3 foot bandana works really well. You can also use it to fashion to tie a bag or all sorts of things. Number 7 is a compass. So you can, especially if you're back east, being able to navigate where you can't see. Out here in the West, it's a little bit easier because we have fewer trees. So all we have to do is climb up on top of a hill and we can see forever. But anywhere where it's wooded, you want some sort of compass and map device. Number 8 is candlelight. Not necessarily just a candle, but headlamp or flashlight, something to have with you. I'm kind of a weirdo. I always carry at least one flashlight. I've got my phone light. This is an Olight Baton 4 that I just put on my belt, and then I can slide it onto my bill of my hat when I need it as I walk around the farm at night. Let's see, canvas needles. He carries around, because you're going to have cordage and you're going to have cloth. He recommends a nice thick canvas needle that can be used to repair shoes or clothing or, whatever equipment that you're carrying with you. If you've got a backpack, you're probably going to want a canvas needle and some heavy duty thread to repair that stuff. And then the last one is cargo tape. I carry around I don't carry it around, but I have it in my kit, a roll of Gorilla Tape that's just rolled up. It's maybe I don't know, 20 feet, 25 feet, something like that. Use that all the time for all sorts of stuff. So that would be from an equipment standpoint. And then, like Dan said, I would have some food in there. I'd have some first aid equipment in there. One of my friends was making fun of me because I put ibuprofen on my list of things to carry with me pretty much at all times. But you think, how often are you walking 70 miles or 50 miles? Not very often. But if you're going to walk to get out of Dodge, you're going to want something that's comfortable. I'd also have comfortable
You guys
shoes
don't
and
do that?
socks and spare clothing and stuff like that.
You guys don't walk 50
No,
miles every day?
we're not,
No, that's weird.
we're not at your level.
Yeah.
I would also say throw a tourniquet in there. I hear that having tourniquets in those is extremely, extremely useful.
Yeah, and you know, it used to be really, you know, you'd go to scouts and they'd be like, here's how to use a tourniquet, but don't ever use it. And then all of a sudden all this data came back from the war in Iraq and the war in Afghanistan, and they're like, no, we've saved thousands of lives by using tourniquets. So yes, you should have one. You can buy them off of Amazon. You can make your own, but you should learn how to use them. Watch a few YouTube videos, become familiar. Don't practice on yourself as far as like actually doing it, but you know, become familiar with how to use one.
All right. You want to talk about your poll?
Cool. Yeah, let's talk about the poll I did on X. Let me just link to it real quick so I can. So I posted this poll and I said, what's likely to kill you the fastest? Let's see. Which will kill you faster in the coming struggles? Option 1, lack of clean water. Option 2, lack of shelter. Option 3, dangerous people. And last of all, lack of shelf-stable food. And you guys voted. You guys want to reveal what you voted?
Well, I'm sharing your tweet on the video for those who are watching, and you can see that
yeah.
I voted lack of clean water was my vote.
Okay. And why did you choose that?
Well, I'm in the majority, so I must be right.
What's your
no, because
rationale?
Like, you're just going to die very quickly without water. I feel like
how quickly
water,
will you...
the shelter is going to depend on the time of year. Like if it's in the winter and it gets to 10 degrees at night, you're going to have a problem.
Yeah.
People, whatever, I'll defend myself against people the best I can. And then, I mean, you can go without food forever. Not forever. That's not literal, but you can go without food for a long time.
Yeah. Okay, cool. That's all very well thought out. I appreciate that. Dan, what did you vote for?
I don't know. I feel kind of dumb now because I'm saying the majority. And I think my instinct was lack of water, but then I went with dangerous people. So
Okay.
Just
I
for the
don't know
record,
why,
if you're
I
in the
just-
majority, you're usually wrong at this point. So don't feel stupid.
I don't know. But those are the two that stood
Come on,
out
we
to
got to
me,
protect our
definitely.
democracy.
Yeah. But I just felt like dangerous people kind of stood out to me only because if things were pretty chaotic and crazy, like we've been talking about, gosh, I mean, you have to be prepared, and you never know like how it's going to go. Like if you're going to have, like you said, the crazy gang leader or drug kingpin that has all his foot soldiers that are insane and don't care about life at all. And so obviously that's something scary and something that just stood out to me as a pretty high risk in those types of situations when it is chaotic and people don't exactly know what to do. And but looking at this and kind of thinking it through, like, yeah, lack of water is definitely going to be an issue. Isn't it like 3 days is all that you can go without water? But like
Yeah.
2
That's
weeks
what
without
the
food.
scientists say.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
they're always right. Trust the science.
Yeah, it must be true.
So the way that I think of this, and I can say that you could be right, obviously. The fastest killer normally is exposure. And that's because you can die, even if it's, I mean, springtime, fall, or winter, you can die from hypothermia pretty darn quickly. And if you are exposed to the elements and you're not used to being exposed to the elements, yeah, we're talking hours, not days. So lack of shelter, however I probably should have worded that differently. Like, yeah, if I have my LL Bean down parka on and my insulated Carhartt pants and my rubber boots, I can sleep outside without shelter, no problem. Well, uncomfortably part of the night, but because I've actually tried that. I went winter camping in the Uintas, and I didn't take a sleeping bag. Well, I took a sleeping bag, but I tried to not sleep in a sleeping bag, and I was super uncomfortable for most of the night. And by probably 3:30 in the morning, I said, okay, I'm going to move over closer to the fire. But this was like hole in the snow, no sleeping bag, just to see what I could do. That was years ago, back when I was tough and cool like Chris Hardman is. But normally exposure is the fastest killer. Now you add in dangerous people, and that could be a really fast killer as well. If you're thinking prophetically, dangerous people might be the first thing, because things will probably be fairly normal until the Assyrian invades, the Assyrian that Isaiah prophesies about coming in the last days. And then it's like, mowing down people left and right. That's pretty dangerous. But lack of shelters, the fastest way to die. Dangerous people, who knows how that's going to play out. Lack of clean water would be the next thing to look to. And then, of course, shelf-stable food, that's going to take you a while. But it is really interesting how people, I even mentioned it earlier, sell your iPad, buy some wheat. And, do you have a solution for clean water? When we lived in Spanish Fork, we lived next to the river down by the golf course. And so my plan was, well, I'll just take buckets and go down to the river and fill up my buckets. And then we have a Berkey gravity water feeder or water filter in the house, where I would just take those buckets, put them in the water filter, maybe strain them through some cloth first, and then put them through the water filter. And so I was like, great, my water is taken care of. I have water year round coming from the Spanish Fork River. When we moved to the farm, we have springs here that run all year long. I got water covered here, no problem. Of course, we live on a well. And so for most issues, the well will do. If the power goes down, the grid goes down, the well pump will no longer work. We got to haul buckets down to the spring. We also store water. So we have a little bit of water storage. And when we lived in Spanish Fork, I had, 6 50-gallon barrels filled with water that we'd rotate out once a year. They say you're supposed to do it more frequently than that, but we had no problem with once a year. And so, yeah, you should have some water available. And if something happens and you fear that the water supply is going to be cut off, fill up your tub, fill up every bucket that you've got, every bowl that you've got, and make sure that you've got water on hand just in case something happens. Even the top of the toilet bowl, and not in the toilet bowl, but the top of the toilet tank is fresh water that you can use in case of an emergency. So yeah, if you're working on your preps, figure out a solution for water. The life straws are a great start because they're inexpensive and they work. The challenge is you have to suck up every drink that you're going to get. And so that can be challenging. I recommend a hand pump, or even better, a gravity fed type solution like the Berkey or Platypus and is it MSR? All have gravity fed solutions.
There's nothing in relation to the end of the world that gives me more anxiety than thinking about turning the faucet on and nothing happening, like the water's gone.
Yeah.
Not just because that means I don't have water, but that means nobody has water, and then the dangerous people part becomes a lot more real. So everybody was wrong.
I know we have it's shelter.
Good job, everyone.
Yeah, that's actually here's a little weirdness. That's one of the best arguments against evolution, is that There is no environment on the earth where people cannot survive without some sort of clothing or shelter. And so there would have to have been a point in which clothing or shelter would have been necessary in order for people to become people.
Evolution is one of like traditional Darwin evolution that science says is real is one of the most embarrassing things that you could believe.
Yeah.
It's just ridiculous. Just
pretty
think about it
ridiculous.
for like
Anyway.
it's the philosophy of the midwits.
Well,
I
I
said I
love
was going to rant about midwits. Here I go. Just kidding.
Yeah. So define
Yeah.
that first of all. What's a midwit?
Let's hear it. Yeah, what do you got?
It's the IQ. It's the meme, the IQ graph meme. I'm trying to stall while I pull it up. Okay, here it is, where you have like the sage, the wise sage on the right, and the low IQ person on the left. And then you have the midwit in the middle, and the midwit is the one who's always wrong. The one on the left and the one on the right always agree with each other. And I have a theory about this.
But for different reasons.
Sorry, I'm delaying. I'm almost there. Okay, it's pulled up. So the one on the left and the one on the right in the meme always agree with each other, and then it's the midwit in the middle who has the 100 IQ that's just saying something stupid all the time. And I think it's because the one on the left is like relying more on just pure observation in their senses. And that's like what science used
Just
to be.
faith.
Yeah, and like they're looking at things and saying, well, I'm looking at it and I see it this way, so it must be that way. And that's it.
Yeah.
And then the one on the right has a high enough IQ that they can take in all these variables and all these different ideas and form an opinion based on all of that. The midwit is a problem because they think they're smart. And so they won't rely on their senses because that's stupid in their minds. They're like, no, I'm smarter than having to rely on my senses. But they're not smart enough to like keep all the ideas in their head and formulate something reasonable. And so then they just end up with these terrible opinions like evolution is real.
So an example would be the guy on the left says God is a man in the sky. And the guy in the middle says, oh, that's ridiculous. I don't believe in that, so God must not be real. And the guy on the right says, God is a man in the sky, because he understands all of the context of religion and creation and knowledge. And it says, okay, the best way, the smartest way that I can surmise all of this or summarize all of this and encapsulate it into something that is comprehensible is to say God is a man in the sky.
Exactly. Look, if you got 100 IQ, I don't hate you or anything. You're great. Apparently you can't move your IQ that much, so I don't know. Don't try and move it up, I guess, but
well,
maybe
it's
you can,
it's
hit
the
yourself
Dunning
in the head or something and move it down. I don't know.
It's the Dunning-Kruger effect. Isn't that what it's called? Where the people who don't know as much think they're more competent than everybody else. Like if you're less capable, the Dunning-Kruger effect says that you will believe you're more capable. And so you gain this confidence even though you're incompetent. And I think we see that, man, trying to be nice. We see that in Silicon Slopes all the time. People who have operated within a company.
I got a list of names now that we brought that up. Just, yeah.
It's like operating within a company. The company seeing some success, and this person showed up to a lot of meetings and observed the success that happened. And so they're like, oh, I created the success. When in reality, it was, some really smart, capable people who actually do the work, who have done the work time and time and time and time again at all sorts of companies. And you guys are laughing because this is like, anyway, this is hitting close to home. For those of you that don't know, Dan is the absolute best advertising specialist that I've ever worked with. And I've spent hundreds of millions of dollars on ads over my career. And Dan is very knowledgeable. He's a phenomenal doer. Like, he gets the work done. And he's also humble at the same time. So he's phenomenal. Chris is also an amazing marketer. As you know, you've seen his stuff on X, but even beyond that, he's phenomenal at driving conversions and branding design and getting people to actually take action. And so we've worked together on a number of projects, and we can just laugh and say, yeah, there are a ton of people who were there for, some of the success of some of the companies in Silicon Slopes, but there are a few people who actually generated that success. And unfortunately, it's the people who attended the success that spin off and create their own agencies and consultancy and try their own thing and expect it to work. And more times than not, it doesn't. And then the people who actually drive the results just quietly go on to drive results somewhere else. And anyway, the whole Dunning-Kruger effect is what we're talking about there. The midwits, man.
The whole idea that
they're just loud.
The smartest people know that they know nothing. It's that kind of thing.
Wait, is that why earlier I was like, I'm probably wrong about all this?
You probably have the highest IQ of anyone here. No offense to me or Dan, but
Probably.
Yep. And I'm like
it really is.
It really 170. So that's pretty high.
Wow.
There you go.
I don't even know.
There you go. Have you ever read any of or watched any of Christopher Langan's stuff? He's the smartest man in the world, and he's like a rancher in Montana. Have you seen this guy?
No, that sounds interesting.
Okay, there's a YouTube. He's on Twitter. He's on X. I follow him. He posts frequently. It's awesome. So there's a bunch on YouTube, and it was actually covered by 60 Minutes or something like that. But Christopher Langan, he was raised in a really rough blue collar household with kind of broken families, stepdads that were abusive and stuff like that. And this kid's born a genius. Like, his head is like 3 or 4 standard deviations larger than everybody else's heads because his brain is so big and he's so smart. And so as a grade schooler and high schooler, he was always just beat down because he was so smart and so far ahead. And he lives in this, blue collar environment. He decides to do college, and he goes to college, and he's like, all of these guys are midwits. They're all idiots. And so he drops out of college, and, he can run circles around anyone. Anyway, he came up with a theory of everything that is really fascinating. He boils it down. He used to have a website. I haven't checked in probably a decade, but he boils it down to some very simple things. He does have a complex paper or two about it, but really fascinating guy. He ends up just kind of leaving society. He's like, this isn't for me. This is all run by a bunch of idiots, and becomes a rancher in Montana. And that's what he does. He just ranches and puts out philosophy and science and mathematics, and can run circles around anyone and everyone. And he's like, the only way we get out of this is if somebody from somewhere else comes that is different from us and actually leads us to success. Because the way that we do it now, it's always like the popular guy or the fast talker that becomes the leader, even though they don't have great ideas. And so they lead us into, all of these, government overspending, wars, all this kind of stuff, because they're just not smart enough to do what it takes to cause humanity to succeed.
I mean, it makes sense. Like, if you were that smart, why would you want to go run the country? Like, it sounds kind of cool, I guess. Like, I'm going to run the country, but it's actually not. It's really terrible. So,
it'd be.
Why would you want to go put yourself into that?
Yeah, it's like working with the midwits in Silicon Slopes who are running the project management, and they're like, okay, this is due on this time. And you're like, why are we even focusing on that? We need to do this other thing that's actually going to generate $1 billion. I can't imagine Christopher Langan trying to operate in DC. Like, can you imagine how infuriating that would be for him?
Be terrible.
Sit there
That's why,
and get lectured by some senator.
that's why nobody wants to. Well, nobody smart wants to do it. That's why you need someone who
Nobody
is,
that
like, almost compelled to do it. They don't want to do it, but they have to. You make them do it because it's like you're the only one who can help us, Tucker Carlson.
Yeah. I heard that.
that was a good one. Yeah, that was good. I like that.
Speaking of the power of the mind, I have kind of an odd thing to talk about that I wanted
Let's
to
do
get
it.
you guys' thoughts on.
Yeah, because everything up until now has been totally normal.
Yeah. Well, it's about to get even weirder.
Sure.
So there were a couple of studies I was listening to a podcast today, and they were talking about that were kind of interesting. And we've been talking about how everybody seems to have this tension, or like they feel like something is coming.
Oh, yeah.
And it's connected to that. So the first one was people waking up before their alarm clock. So like you set your alarm clock for 7 o'clock and you wake up at 6:55. I'm sure, like, I've experienced that. I don't know if you guys have. That one's pretty common. People like wake up all the time, and the scientists will say, well, it's their biological clock is used to waking up at that time, and so they wake up. This guy was like, well, I'm gonna try and find alarms that are random and see if it still happens. And so he actually studied firefighters who are sleeping at the station because they don't know when the alarm's going to come in, because a fire could start at any time. And the same thing would happen with them. Like 5 to 10 minutes before a fire alarm would come in, they would wake up, or a good chunk of them would wake up. And I guess in some fire stations, it's like so common that they'll wake up and they'll just like get dressed. Like, well, an alarm's about to come, so I'm just going to get dressed and be ready for it. And so there was that study. And then there was another study of rats, and they would run these rats through mazes. But they found that as the rats of a certain breed were running through the maze and learning the maze, they would then take rats who had never done the maze and put them into the maze, and like they would get better. And then it got weirder, where that breed of rat across the world was doing better at that maze their first time through, as like more and more rats did it, until they could take a rat and like that had never been in the maze, never had family in the maze, like no connection to the maze, and they would just run the maze. And they don't know, obviously there's no real explanation for this. There is the idea that your heart, and this is an idea, this is, I guess, science, that your heart is emitting an electrical field, and it goes about 6 feet around you. And so potentially information is being transferred that way. But as I was listening to these studies, I'm like, this is what's happening. Everybody can feel it coming, because there's like some, like, I don't know, premonition that we're tapping into. Maybe I like to go back to scripture and be like, this is the light of Christ. Like, the light of Christ is in everything. And if you are tuned into it, that's why the Holy Ghost can reveal all things to you, because he knows all things, because the light of Christ is in everything. It's just interesting.
It literally has to be that. It has to be something esoteric. Have you guys read about the Global Consciousness Project? Have you heard about that? It started at Princeton, and what they did is they took a random number generator, and it generates random numbers. It just goes all the time, generating random numbers. And then they started placing them, they replicated them, and then started placing them all over the world. And one of the claims, and it's been disputed multiple times, it's been upheld multiple times, but one of the claims is that the Global Consciousness Project predicted 9/11 and every other major event, so that before an earthquake happens, the randomness changes. Before 9/11, the randomness changes. And this isn't based on humans aren't doing the inputs. It's a random number generator that they're all kind of synchronizing before these major events happen. And so it has to be something non-biological, esoteric, and probably associated with the light of Christ that drives these things. But it's a phenomenon that's been observed over and over and over again, as you mentioned, that I think if we tie it back to the purpose of this podcast and the stuff that we're talking about, ask anybody what they think is going to happen in the next election. And, granted, I have a lot of friends who are really weird and think about things kind of the way that I do. But even people who are not like us, you say, hey, what do you think is going to happen with the election? And what's the answer? What would you guys say people would answer?
So I've asked people, because I was thinking the same thing. I'm like, well, everybody's saying that because they're all like me. Like, I'm only talking to people who are like me. And I started asking people who are not like me, and it's the same thing. They're like, I don't know, but like, I don't feel good about it. Something weird is going to happen.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Dan, have you
I mean-
observed that at all?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's just a sense of impending doom. I mean, I don't know how else to explain it, but it just feels like no matter what, it's going to suck. So I think we could all just kind of sense it. And so it's like, well, how? Like, how's it going to play out? But it's not good.
Yeah, and it's interesting because depending on the audience, let's look at it politically. From a political standpoint, anybody on the right goes, man, if Biden gets reelected, it's going to suck. Anybody on the left is like, oh man, if Trump gets back in office, we're all doomed, right? Things are going to get really crazy. But the same thing happens with any current topic. We talk about immigration. You talk about the economics, the health of our economy, our global economy. Like everybody's like, yeah, things seem kind of sketchy right now. And the question is, does that feeling drive the end result of things becoming weird and wild and challenging? Or is something going to happen and we're just sensing it ahead of time? But you guys have seen me post about this multiple times on X. It's like, as we see these news events happen, as these feelings come out, are people actually changing their behavior? Are they saying, okay, I need to get water. I need to get 72-hour kits. I need to get a secondary location that I can go to. I need to get a Dwelt membership. Like, what's changing in your day-to-day in response to these things? And even better, am I going to the scriptures more often? Am I praying more often? Am I serving my neighbor more often? Am I serving in my calling more often? Am I going to church? Am I encouraging others to go to church? All of those things. It's like, are these feelings helping drive behavior? Or is it just like business as usual? Let's go get our dirty Dr. Pepper and drink our crumble cookie and watch whatever's on TV. Let's save up money to get our houseboat or whatever it is. It's like, we need to be changing our behaviors as we recognize these feelings that are happening, because they're predicting something. One of the things that I've been thinking a lot about is, are we feeling these things because they're telling us to feel these things, because they're seeding our music and our media with contention and fear and doom and all of that kind of stuff? And I think that's certainly part of it. I think, demons feed off of that fear and that pain. Star Wars wasn't too far off, right? The more fear that Luke has, the more powerful the Emperor gets, right? And so, I think that some of that is manufactured. I think some of it is divine. And what it really comes down to is, how are we taking those feelings into action? I'm really concerned that people are taking those feelings that are being manufactured by the Gadiantons of the world that control media and messaging, and they're saying, okay, I'm going to prepare to get violent in an offensive way. I'm going on the offense. That's really scary, really dangerous, and really a bad idea. That's one of the great things that we learn in the Book of Mormon is anytime the faithful covenant keeping people decide to go on the offense or on the offensive, they lose. I think, I think there's quite a bit in the Old Testament about Israel doing that as well. Whenever they decided to do the thing that they shouldn't have done, they get wrecked, to put it like my teenage boy says it. But if we approach it from a place of humility and hope and light, then we're proactive in terms of how can I help? How can I help my family? How can I help myself? How can I help my neighbors? How can I help strangers that are going to be coming for help? And I hope everybody can kind of transition into that. I've been operating in that for a while. At first, I was operating out of how do I take care of myself and my family? And now I'm operating out of how can I help the many, many, many people that are going to need help? And how can I prepare them to help other people who are going to need help? That's where we should all get to.
Agreed. And when we talk about these kinds of things, a lot of times people will be like, well, aren't you like, it's all doomsday and like depressing, and doesn't it like get you down? And I think another thing is you can't let it get you depressed. Like we win. Dan said it earlier. We win in the end. Like Christ wins. We're on the right team. Like, yeah, even if things get bad, you're on the right side. So no, I don't get down.
Yes.
I'm excited. Like,
Somebody-
it's gonna be awesome.
Somebody replied to your tweet and said, no, Christ already won. Like it's already in the books. And I think that's a great way to look at it for sure.
Yeah.
Okay. I have more. Mitch has more. Dan has stuff. Where you guys want to take something?
Yeah. Dan,
There's
what's on your
there's
list?
a million things in the world.
We're
only like halfway
seeing,
through here, so
we keep seeing
Yeah.
commenters saying, we want more Dan. We want more Dan.
yeah.
So let's do it, Dan.
Oh, let's see. I got to remember what I had on my list. I was adding a bunch of things. It kind of depends on which direction we want to go. Do we want to be more
Pick your own adventure,
spiritual?
Dan.
Let's see. I'm just pulling up the list real quick here. See what I put on there.
Do you need a minute to go through that?
Well, so one thing that kind of jumped out at me as I was looking at this is, I guess to explain Dwelt a little further, but like we've talked a little bit about this, like why a safe haven? That's the question that kind of I was thinking about, because I know when we were kind of coming up with all the ideas with this, we talked about having it be a safe haven. So I guess how would you guys explain that to people listening? What is making it a safe haven?
Yeah. So, I mean, we've kind of hit and hammered hard on the distance of putting distance between yourself and the people who are going to be out there harming other people. I think that's a big one. But the more I think of Dwelt, as I've studied the last days and the signs of the times and stuff like that, there's some apocryphal, but there's also some fairly legitimate sources talking about that there will be people gathering in places of refuge. And it's like, okay, what's a place of refuge? And a lot of us have heard that the girls' camps that the church has put together, at least in the West, but I think probably throughout the country or throughout the world, are places that are up in the mountains or off the beaten path that have water systems and sanitary systems. And it's like, okay, that's a place we can go to. That'll be a place of refuge. And so for years, I was like, yeah, the church has got us. You're like, we're good. We can go to the girls' camps. But when I started homesteading, I realized that there's nothing there. Like, yeah, water and sanitary facilities and some shelters. Not all these girls' camps have shelters, but some of them do. That's all super important and definitely needed for long-term survival and short-term survival. But where are, I tweeted earlier this week about right at the beginning of the Book of Mormon, in First Nephi, the Nephites travel to the Promised Land. So they build a ship, they cross the ocean, they get to the Promised Land, and Nephi says, "We planted all the seeds that we had." And then he's like, "Fortunately, that worked out great, and we harvested, a ton of stuff. It was awesome because the Americas are really productive." And I think about, like, number one, do we have seeds? Like, where's the food to get us through our first year? Where are the seeds that we can plant the next year to grow the food that's going to get us through the second year? And then who has the skills to do that? Who has the skills to grow a garden and have it be successful? Or can we bring animals and breed them and keep them reproducing so that we can have milk and meat and eggs and stuff like that? And I started to realize that, yes, while the girls' camps are a great resource, if we're going to have places of refuge, we need to start building them ourselves. We need to start putting them together. And then it's like, okay, I can't afford to build a place of refuge for everybody that's going to need it, but we can start doing that together. And not everybody's got a couple $100,000 to buy a piece of land, to buy 2 acres or 3 acres out in rural America. But collectively, if we start putting our money together, we can get land, we can get shelters, we can start storing up the stuff that's going to get us through the first year, and we can start gaining the skills that's going to get us through the second year and the third year and allow us to actually survive and rebuild. And so I put a lot of thought into this, and a lot of people have tried it, right? There are communities right here in Utah, in the West Desert, where they say, "Hey, come for $50,000. You get 5 acres, but then you have to grow stuff and be part of the co-op." And it's like, okay, well, who's got $50,000 in cash to put into something? Can we lower that bar a little bit? And then it's like, okay, you have to be part of the co-op and produce something that the co-op can sell. Where are you going to gain those skills and the tools and resources? Well, somebody has to be there to help train you and get you there. And so, we've also seen it for, like, weird communes that are either religious or drug related, and those always go down in flames. And so we wanted to try to build something that is a solution that not everybody can afford. Not everybody can do this. Not everybody will want to, but to be accessible, from, having a place where you can show up, have your shelter already built for you, have infrastructure in place for you, and have animal husbandry and gardening and sanitation and security skills and medical skills already there that you can come and begin learning. And so that's really kind of where the vision of Dwelt started. And that's what we want. We want to create a membership where you can become a member and spend all of your spare time out at the land working with us to develop the skills and build the infrastructure and create the places that can be places of refuge. And then those skills are portable, right? You do it at Dwelt, Utah. You can then do it at Dwelt, Arizona. You can do it in Dwelt, Colorado, or wherever we have these locations. And even if you say, okay, I've got the skills and I know how to do this, I can do this for a girls' camp. I can do this for, a rural town. And our goal, my family's goal, is to be able to produce enough food from our farm to feed all of the survivors in our local community. Now, we live in a town with only a couple thousand people. And if of those people, 20% of them survive, it's like, okay, can we feed 400 people indefinitely? I think we can. So that's what we've been working on for the past couple of years. I don't know if I've shared anything that I haven't shared before about Dwelt, but that's where we're starting, and that's the vision of it. We want everybody to come join us in this endeavor, and I want to share the homesteading skills that I've developed and the skills of the experts who are already part of Dwelt. We've got solar experts, we've got off-grid living experts, we've got water infrastructure experts, we've got security experts, and we've been stacking them up to be part of this podcast, but also to help with our YouTube channel and all the other content that's going to help us actually see this to fruition. Dan, does that answer your question or go into it enough?
It's good. Thank you.
And that's a big part of that is that we have all these experts. We are creating guides. We're creating content. This podcast will have all kinds of videos and stuff. And so even if you're not able to get to a Dwell community or be part of it that way, we still want to like help you learn how to do this stuff. So
Yeah.
not to like pivot 360 degrees, but I'm realizing how far we are into this and we haven't talked about the updated eclipse information. And I feel like
hit
we
us with
have
it,
to
Chris.
talk
What do
about
you
it.
got?
Yeah.
I feel like
Okay.
I'm walking into a catastrophe, and I hope I'm in a position to help people.
Okay, you're going, right?
I'm going, and it's supposed to be overcast. Like we probably won't even be able to see the eclipse. But
Oh,
we've
it's
got
just gonna be
family in
dark
the area,
anyways.
so it's going to be a family get together for us, regardless.
Okay. I thought I had bookmarked a post that like listed everything out, but apparently not. So I will do my best. Well, first of all, you have well, do I start with CERN? I guess I'll start with NASA. NASA's launching 3 rockets at the eclipse, right? Like during the eclipse, they're launching 3 rockets up in the sky. I don't know what the purpose is. Is it related to the eclipse? Do you know?
Yeah, they're one of the things that really stands out is they're trying to study the electromagnetic effects of the eclipse, which kind of blows my mind because number one, we've had lots of eclipses and we have them all the time, all around the world. Not all the time, but fairly frequently. Like, what are they trying to observe that we haven't already observed? And how does sunshine being shaded by the moon impact electromagnetism? It seems like you would be able to get that data at night when the earth is blocking the other side of the earth with the sun or from the sun. Like, doesn't make any sense to me. I don't get it.
Yeah, it's pretty odd. So they're launching the 3 rockets. There's going to be potentially a Devil's Comet. Have you seen that?
I have. I mean, I saw a little bit about it. It's a comet. It probably won't be visible to the naked eye. Like you have to have a telescope and stuff to see it, I think.
Yeah,
So,
I think there's
and why
I
they
think
call
will
it a
be
devil's
visible in the
comet?
next 6 months.
No
or
idea.
like sometime in the next 6 months, I think it will be visible to the naked eye, but they don't know exactly when. So it could be during the eclipse, is what people are saying.
Yeah, and there's another part of the eclipse that it's like, oh, it could happen. I think it's a supernova. Is that what it is?
Yes.
It's like
yeah.
they're
Like new
waiting
stars
for
appearing in
it
the
to
sky.
happen, and they're like, yeah, they're like, oh, it could happen sometime. Like, okay.
Yeah, maybe that's what I was thinking of. You're right. I think that's what it was. That could happen. It's like sometime in the next 4 to 6 months, I think.
Yeah. I was like, I think they threw that into the article for just good measure.
Hey, you never know. That would be pretty cool. Okay, and then you have CERN. So CERN is the particle collider in Switzerland. I don't know how big it is. It's like 200 miles or something. It's like some crazy big thing that they launch particles at each other.
I think
and
it's just
try and collide them.
I think it's just 17 miles. But the
So is
the
the new one they're
ridiculousness
building
of it
bigger?
is possibly, I think the ridiculousness of the Hadron Collider is the particles go around at like 10,000 times a minute or something like that. So they travel that fast around the 17-mile track.
Okay, I see. I will pull up this picture for people who are watching. This is the collider as it currently stands compared to what they are building. So they are expanding it. It's currently 27 kilometers, which is about 17 miles, and they're expanding it to be 100 kilometers. So anyways, they're turning it on during the eclipse. There's a lot of conspiracies about this place and what it is. They had a ceremony of, I
Yeah,
don't know,
you
like
want to
2016.
pull up the logo? Pull up the logo.
Okay, I'll pull up the logo. While I'm doing
We
that,
could
I will also pull up stuff from the ceremony. So they had the ceremony in
that
2016 with a bunch of like
the
very
Shiva statue.
strange esoteric stuff. Yeah, so all kinds of weird stuff going on at CERN. There's I don't want to say that it's like a for sure thing, but it seems like every time they turn it on, weird stuff happens. That's all I'm gonna say. These are some of the images from like their opening ceremony they did several years ago. Kind of weird stuff. There's like a mock human sacrifice at CERN. This is the Guardian.
Yeah.
This is not like a conspiracy website. They did
Well,
this.
and that's the Shiva statue right there, and you've got Shiva as
Okay,
like
right there.
I don't know, somebody will throw me under the bus for this one, but a lot of the chaos and mischief is represented by Shiva, and she's standing, or it is standing in front of this open portal, and so you have this, this track, the 17-mile track, and then you've got Shiva in front of it, standing in front of an open portal, and then you have these crazy ceremonies with the Switzerland tunnel. Like, people are going, there's tons of conspiracy theories around this. Oh, and the logo. What is that
There's
logo made up of?
666.
A few
Looks like
sixes,
three
maybe?
sixes to me. So all kinds of weird stuff with CERN. They are turning it on during the eclipse. They warmed it up. I guess they like warm it up early. I think it was March 22nd. They started to warm it up so that they could do their experiment while the eclipse is happening. And there's like something in the collider. I'm trying to remember. I don't want to call it an entity because that does.
Oh, they called it
way
a,
down the
they called it a
conspiracy
ghost
hole.
in the data.
Or
Yeah,
a
they called it a
phantom or
ghost in the
something,
data.
Fourth dimensional
A
phantom.
phantom, yeah. That's
There's
right.
a fourth dimensional phantom in the collider that is blocking particles, according to the scientists there. So, what that is, I don't know. Maybe we'll find out.
That seems totally normal to
Eclipse
me.
Day when it gets
Totally
let
normal.
loose. Yeah, not a problem
Well,
at all. So,
and
all kinds of
the-
weird stuff happening around the eclipse now.
okay, so let's get into some of the weird stuff with CERN, because there is a theory that CERN is the reason they're doing all of this is they're working on a way to open the portal to hell. And what does that even mean? Well, some people are like, oh, it's going to open up hell, and it's the shape of a portal, so demons are going to come flying out. You can take that and say, actually, what they're trying to do. And again, this is just fun, like conspiracy talk, right? What they're actually trying to do is develop technology that will provide a mechanism for the spirits, that the third of the host of heaven that fell following Lucifer, that they will be able to possess bodies in that have been animated or that have been created, that they can then animate through the technology of CERN. And that this technology existed before the flood, and it was because of this technology that the Lord decided to do the flood, to wipe out every living thing, to ensure that there was nothing living that was possessed by any of the followers of Satan. So that's a whole thing. I mean, could be plausible. I don't know. Sounds kind of wild to me, obviously. And so that's why there's this big concern that, holy crap, CERN is going to open up the pit of Hades by providing a mechanism for the spirits that followed Satan to actually animate bodies that have been developed through cloning and are being kept in, below the Denver airport or wherever it is. It's so, there's this big sentiment that nefarious things are happening. And I've got a tweet open right here.
Well, I just need to know, where are you getting this info? Like, why have I not even heard of CERN? What is going on? Am I following the wrong things? Like,
This is the problem with being a conspiracy theorist for so long, is people will be like, "Where did you get this info?" I'm
Yeah.
like, "I don't even know anymore. I don't know where to even
Yeah.
go to find it at this point." Like, that's a
Yeah.
great question.
So Chris,
I'm just making it all up.
Chris, yeah, I just texted you this tweet by Nick Hinton, where he gets into some of this, Dan. So he talks about Aleister Crowley, who wrote, the Satan Worshipper's Bible, essentially, and how he contacted Satan and was with him for 3 days, communed with him for 3 days between April 8th, 1904 and April 10th, 1904. And the information that he received from Satan aligns very closely with CERN in symbol and in deed, and he's speculating that there will be 3 days of darkness, just like there was when Aleister Crowley communed with Satan for 3 days between April 8th and April 10th. And I don't know that he's the one that originated this, but I've had a number of people share a TikTok video with me. I don't know if you follow Dick Holiday. He's a biblical scholar that does not look like a biblical scholar, and has some really great content on TikTok. But all my friends sent me that video where, honestly, I haven't watched the full thing, but I started watching it, and it's this kind of stuff. I'm like, oh yeah, this is a good review. But there is speculation that between April 8th and April 10th will be a period of darkness, not just because of the eclipse, but because of satanic powers and what CERN is trying to do. And, that there is a time of darkness predicted by Isaiah in the last days, generally speaking, before the restoration. In Isaiah, I think 3 or 4 times, I have a notebook where I made all the lists, where he talks about darkness before the restoration of the gospel, but also darkness where, you look throughout the land and there's darkness. You've also got the prophecy by Joel in Joel chapter 2, where he talks about the sun being darkened for a period. Of course, President Hinckley in 2001 October conference, his talk, Living in the Fullness of Times, he actually says that the prophecy of Joel in Joel chapter 2 has been fulfilled. And so that may be like a once and for all fulfillment, or it may be that because of the events of 9/11, it was fulfilled. So if you're taking notes on resources, that talk, Living in the Fullness of Times by President Hinckley, is one for the record books. You should definitely get to know that. It's a good one. And I remember listening to it live and hearing him quote Joel chapter 2 and then saying, "This has been fulfilled." And I was like, what? No way, that's been fulfilled? The time is close. And that was in 2001. So we're even closer now if we were close then.
And we've talked about this already, but you have all this weird stuff happening on the day of the eclipse. You also have like tension rising around the world. Like, it just came out that Russia did attack diplomats and stuff, if we're to believe the story, with the Havana syndrome. And Israel killed some Iranian diplomats. Russia is still blaming the United Kingdom and the United States for the terrorist attack that happened there. And so you just have all of these events like boiling under the surface, and then a bunch of weird stuff happening on the day itself. I think when we first talked about the eclipse, I said it was nothing, but it's starting to feel like something.
Well, you've said, I think there's something here for quite a while. I think there's something going on. There was a video going around about how the eclipse, between the lunar eclipse, the solar eclipse of 2017, and then this year's solar eclipse, that it forms an Aleph across and a Tav across the United States, and it passes through Nineveh, and the other one passed through Jerusalem's. And anyway, there's all this stuff about the eclipse, and it just seems to pile on and pile on and pile on. I may be a denier, but I actually am reminded of some of the feeling that people had in 2012 with the Aztec calendar ending. Remember that? It was like the Aztec calendar ends with 2012. And so that means the world's going to end with 2012. And it never did. Dude, I remember Y2K. Okay, this is how insane I am. With the year 2000 coming, I remember like everybody was outfitting or patching the issue with computers that it couldn't roll over to the year 2000, and it was going to send us back to the Stone Age. And this was, the internet was fairly new to people. We were primarily using email back then. But I watched the news for 24 hours to see if anything was going to happen. I remember Kiribati, which is, I don't know, country out in the middle of the Pacific. They're like, okay, we're going to see if anything happens in Kiribati. Well, there weren't any computers really. And so then it was like New Zealand, and then Australia, and then Asia, and then Europe, or Africa and Europe and India, and all that. I just watched, and then they're like, well, it might, when it hits the US, because we've got all these computers, it might happen, and nothing happened. And so I feel kind of the same sentiment that we had then, and in 2008, and in 2012, and in 2020. I'm like, I don't know. I'm just going to go visit family and see this eclipse. And if things happen bad after that, I'm more concerned about the 8 years after the 2017 sign, putting us at, the Revelation 12 sign that happened in 2017. Somebody mentioned, I don't know who it was, but somebody mentioned on X, they're like, stop and explain the things that you're talking about. So you mentioned the Revelation 12 sign that happened in 2017, and they're like, I know nothing about this. Where do I go to find more information about it? And I'm like, just search YouTube. It's all there. So Revelation 12 sign in 2017, and then Isaiah chapter 7, where the Lord says, I'll give you a sign in the heavens, and it'll be about, basically describes the Revelation 12 sign. And then he says, the child won't be old enough at the age of accountability before all of these things happen, before the Assyrian invades before the two kings are destroyed. That's what it is. The two kings are gone. So I'm like, okay, that has more credence to me than all of this stuff about the eclipse. I have yet to see anyone of authority on the earth say this eclipse is a sign of things to come. Lots of us are speculating about that it could be, but I have yet to see anyone with apostolic or prophetic authority say, look to the eclipse for a sign. And
Can't wait for President Oaks to get up and drop a whole talk about the eclipse. Yeah, that's what he would do it.
If that's the case, maybe I'll load up the car and head back home Sunday night.
First of all, the world did end in 2012. That's why we have the what's it called? The Mandela effect.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
And then on the topic of the eclipse, Leland Tanner, he posted a couple of tweets that I thought were good, and I feel like they sum up my feelings too. So I'll read them real quick. He says,
okay,
I do believe the eclipse is a sign and a wonder and a warning for us. I do believe it already has and will move many to seek God more earnestly. I also see that things are weird, and I feel uneasy about all the strange omens and the things lining up. Be aware, be not troubled. These things are prophesied. These things are exactly what we should be expecting. The synchronicity of it all is the comfort.
Yeah, and I respect Leland. I mean, super smart dude, way smarter than I am. He could probably have written that tweet in rhyme, and
yeah, he could have definitely
on beat, right? So I don't easily discount what he says there, and I agree with that. And I mean, whether I believe it or not, I'm still taking extra fuel. I'm taking extra food. We're taking freeze-dried food. We're taking water. The place that we're staying is right by a lake, so I'm taking water filters. We'll have sleeping bags, and Man, hopefully if things do get bad, number one, we can help out a little bit. And number two, we can make our way back. And I sure wish we already had a Dwelt location set up on the other side of Dallas, because that could help us out quite a bit.
Well, we'll try to have something set up for when you get back.
Okay.
It's going to be a long walk, so give us some time.
I'm taking my good walking shoes.
I told Leland that I would talk about how pagans stole Easter from us and not the other way around. But we're like,
yeah, let's do it
to do this. Okay, let's do it.
Bring it up. Yeah, I actually love that idea.
Yeah, I'm not the expert on this. I think Leland will come on here one day and he can explain it in more detail. But the idea is basically like, it was Easter on Sunday and you have all these people who hate us. It's usually actually not even pagans, because pagans are mostly LARPing and not real. It's usually the atheists. Who are like angry at religion, and they're like, you guys are just stealing this holiday from the pagans. But the argument is that the pagans actually stole it from, I don't know if I would call it Christianity, but yeah, I guess it is Christianity, in that Adam gets kicked out of the Garden of Eden, and he then begins worshiping God, and had the true religion on the earth, I guess, at that point. And then as time goes on, that religion gets corrupted and becomes things that we now look at as like ancient religions, like the pagan stuff, and Eastern religion really falls into that category. Some of like the Greek gods and Egyptian gods and all that kind of stuff falls into this category where they actually at one point stemmed from the true religion and just got corrupted through the ages. And so pagans stole it from us, not the other way around.
Yeah. And I saw a YouTube video once by some scholar that I really appreciated, really enjoyed. And his example of that was the persistence of the constellations throughout history. So the earliest history that we have that mentions constellations describes the same constellations, not just like, oh, Virgo is, this configuration of stars. It's like, no, Virgo represents a virgin, and Leo represents a lion, and Scorpio represents a scorpion. And it's like those characters associated with constellations have been around for centuries, all the way back that we have history for. And I look at, the Big Dipper all the time. I love to look at the Big Dipper, find the Little Dipper, show my kids, show the young men that we're camping with, the scouts or whoever it was over the years. I'm like, okay, here's how you find the North Star. Here's how you orient yourself using the stars. And I've looked at the Big Dipper and the Little Dipper, Ursa Major, Ursa Minor. And I'm like, who said those are bears? Because those don't look like bears. They look like boxes or ladles or, dippers, right? I'm like, those aren't bears. Nobody would say those are bears unless God said to Adam, those constellations are bears. And here's what they mean. And here's what you can look forward to in the last days or throughout time that has to do with bears. And that one over there, that's a virgin. And that's representative of the virgin birth of Jesus Christ that's going to happen at the meridian of time and all throughout time. So you have this original knowledge that Christ taught Adam at the beginning of time. And I don't even think it's the pagans. I think it's Adam's son Cain that it starts with. He starts to take these truths and spin them into half truths or part truths. He changes them, and that's why his title is Master Mahan, right? He took the knowledge of God and was tempted by Satan to translate it into something perverted. And so then instead of making a sacrifice in the similitude of the only begotten son by sacrificing an animal, just like Christ's sacrifice, he brings fruit from the tree and says, no, accept this sacrifice. It's a perversion of the truth. And then not only did Cain start that, but Lamech took it a step further. He also killed to get gain, but then he said, hey, we're going to layer on a level of covenanted secretivity or secretness on top of this. And we're going to have this conspiracy where if you tell that you made the oath not to tell, then we get to slit your throat. And so I think from even as early as Cain and Lamech were these false things taught. And then you go on, you know, the earth is cleansed in the flood. And then you've got, you know, the Tower of Babel that happens, and Gilgamesh and Nimrod and all that kind of stuff. And it just persists. So yeah, I fully agree with Leland. The truth was original. The truth came directly from God, and it was the adversary that changed all this stuff. So when we celebrate Easter or Christmas, those signs were taught to Adam, those timelines were taught to Adam, and it's just the adversary messing them up. Yeah, there's some traditions that carried over, and I think we need to individually look at those and decide what traditions we want to keep for our families and which traditions we can do away with, so that we can actually focus on what God taught Adam and what Christ exemplified to us, rather than, you know, let's all get new dresses and new toys and new candy for Easter. And I mean, I don't know what the answer is. My 4-year-old son was like, candy. And I'm like, yep, you get candy, because I want you to remember this day as a joyous day. And we're going to talk a lot about the resurrection and the atonement and of Christ. And you're going to associate those things with the deliciousness of candy that you love. Like, I'm okay with that. That's what we're going to do. So yeah, I think Leland's spot on that. It's pretty cool.
It is cool, and it's almost a testament to Christ when you can see all these ancient religions and traditions with the same themes and same patterns, knowing that they came from the one true gospel. So it's kind of cool.
Yep. Man, our list, we haven't gotten through much of the list. There's so much more to talk about, but we're a couple of hours into this. I think we need to wrap on this episode, and
I'm just
pick
going
it
to
up
throw
on
it
the
out
next one.
there. It can either be a tease for the next one, or you can agree to go into it. But I know you've been
All
wanting
right.
to talk about the red hair OnlyFans chick. You've been wanting to
Yeah.
since the first episode, so I'm just giving you the chance.
Well, it was just one of those news items that I was like, oh, this is relevant. And I'm going to have to look her up, because I don't even know what her name is or anything like that. Maybe you can do that. But while I give the backstory, there's this young woman who was kind of made famous, as far as I know. I don't follow these types of creators, but she was kind of made famous because she was on this podcast. I don't even know what the podcast is, but it's two dudes that usually invite a bunch of OnlyFans girls. And those of you who don't know what OnlyFans is, it's like amateur pornography, I guess, that people can subscribe to and watch. Anyway, so they invite these girls on, and then they talk about how to be valued as a woman. And anyway, it's always a bunch of controversy. And anyway, she was on there, and she's
sorry, he's a friend. The whatever
okay.
podcast.
Is that what it is? Okay.
Yeah.
So anyway, there was a young woman on there that had bright red hair, like Ariel from The Little Mermaid, bright red hair. And she talked about something that the internet decided to share all over. It was something about, I think, about cheating or something like that. Like she thinks cheating is cool. And so everybody kind of went nuts about it. She went viral. And anyway, I guess she's an OnlyFans creator. And it was like a month ago, she comes out online and says, I found Christ. And yeah, I'm giving it all up for Christ. What's her name? Nala Ray. And she gets baptized. And so everybody's talking about this. Like, okay, is she sincere in her baptism? Is she sincere in following Christ? Or is this just some weird, gross way to get more followers on her OnlyFans? Like, what's going on here? And she deleted her OnlyFans. Like, all of this content that was paying her easily tens of thousands of dollars per month, she deleted it all. And in Christianity, there's been this, big conversation about, is she sincere? Is she really following Christ? Or should we be dubious of this? Should we celebrate her conversion, or should we condemn her for perverting the concept of conversion? Anyway, so she did a video, and it was actually that one on the left that says, I was a pastor's kid for almost all my life. And she gives her backstory. And she talks about how she didn't have a great relationship with her parents. They were very overbearing. Her dad was a pastor, and so he was very controlling. And anyway, she goes into it that she turned away, that it drove her away from Christ because of the way her parents were behaving. And it wasn't just her parents, it was the church. And so in this video on the left, where she's going off about the decision she made, she says, turn away from the church and turn towards Christ. So accept Christ because he can cleanse you, heal you, and bless you, but don't accept the church. And when she said that, because I actually watched, this to see, where she was coming from and see if I could discern whether she was being sincere or not. As she was saying that, I kind of bristled, because it is so common. And I've seen this in the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints with members who say, I don't need the church, I only need Christ. And I had an experience. I was a high counselor, and I was involved in multiple disciplinary councils, is what they were called at the time. And one of them, a gentleman came in, and it was a horrific experience. It rocked me, and it took me at least a month to kind of overcome the feelings that this experience happened. But usually in a disciplinary council, you can just feel the love of God and mercy from Christ. And the whole room fills with light and love and mercy, and it's a great blessing, even when the person maybe lose their membership. But this guy came in, and he was obstinate and rude, and he was like, I don't need any of you. I'm here just to bless you with my presence. I don't need any of this because I have Christ. And there was such darkness and such pain and such anguish. And it was brutal. In fact, I called my dad afterwards and was like, Dad, without giving any details, this just happened, and I feel really messed up over it. And my dad, who has been a bishop and a stake president and a mission president and a patriarch and is a sealer in the temple, the best father anybody could ask for, he was like, yeah, I know what you're feeling. It's going to take you a few weeks to shake it. It was that disturbing. Anyway, because it was so disturbing, I got into the scriptures and tried to understand what happened. Like, okay, do we really need the church? Why do I feel so bad? When he was like, no, I work directly with Christ. And it brought me back into the book of Moses and the book of Abraham, when Adam and Eve sin, they partake of the fruit, and they're cast out of the garden. And what does God do? God puts cherubim and a flaming sword in front of the tree of life, so that Adam and Eve won't partake and live forever in their sin. I'm like, okay, that's some symbolism that I don't quite understand. I need to dive into this. And cherubim, if you look at the Hebrew word, is the same word as seraphim. And there's not much of an indication as to why the King James translators translated seraphim in some places and cherubim in other places. But by the I am at the end that it's a plural. So God put at least two angelic beings in front of the tree of life and a flaming sword. And sword in the scriptures usually refers to is a symbology for truth. And so this is a truth, a sword of truth, and it's flaming. And what does flame do? Flame purifies and refines. And so you think of the Lord, God flooded the earth to purify it once, and he promised that he would never do it again by water. but he will burn the earth to purify it again in the last days, right? So I'm going off on this. I'm taking you somewhere in all of this. God puts cherubim, at least two men or two angelic beings, and truth between Adam and Eve, the sinners, and the tree of life, the tree that is symbolic of the Savior. If we look to Lehi's dream and Lehi's vision, the tree of life is mentioned there, and it is the love of God, and the fruit is the fruits of the atonement and resurrection of Jesus Christ. And the tree of life is mentioned elsewhere in the scriptures as well. And so why would God put truth and men between the fallen Adam and Eve and the tree of life? Well, to protect them from eating of the fruit directly and living forever in their sins. And as I've seen so many people turn away from the church and say, oh, I'll just work directly with God, what happens? They lose ordinances, they lose covenants, and they lose the blessings of the temple. And so what ends up happening? They live forever in their sins. There's no hope for them to overcome those sins without priesthood authority, ordinances, and blessings. And so they're stuck there. And you guys have seen this, I'm sure, in your life, that without the ordinances and the authority and the truth, you're just stuck. You don't go anywhere. And so as this young woman was talking about, no, you just need Christ, you don't need the church. That's why I bristled, because I'm like, no, we actually do need the church. We need the authority and we need those ordinances, because if we just go say, oh, I'm just working directly with God, we get stuck. I've never seen anybody who's abandoned the ordinances and the priesthood ever overcome any of those weaknesses. In fact, they just embrace them. And then they start to be prideful and arrogant about them, like, hey, I'm doing this now. And you start seeing them posting on social media. I call it apostate bingo, because you can just check off the list. It's like, okay, there's word of wisdom, there's law of chastity, there's like covenants being broken. There's just go down the list, and it happens every single time. And so one of my greatest concerns is that, granted, she hasn't had access to priesthood authority and covenants that are made in and outside of the temple. And so having her say, you just need Christ, you don't need the church, concerns me greatly. And I don't think she's doing it maliciously. I think it's just, her current understanding. But those of us who are members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, who are covenant holders, we need to be mindful that the priesthood authority and the ordinances are part of that design and were given to us symbolically from the very beginning. Like, we need those things so that we're not stuck and live forever in our sins. Thanks, Chris. I've been wanting to go off on that for a couple of weeks now.
You're welcome. I knew it. I'm glad you got to.
So with that, I think, we can wrap things up here. And what do I say every time? Well, in addition to go follow your neighbors, or go visit your neighbors, follow the prophet. We have the tremendous opportunity to listen to General Conference this weekend. If you're listening to this podcast and you've hung on for this long, I'm sure you're probably super excited to listen to General Conference. And I hope and pray that you are. I've been praying emphatically that my heart will be softened, that whatever messages are given, that I will receive them and implement them in my life so that I can be a better disciple of Jesus Christ. And I'm so looking forward to that, way more than the eclipse, way more than anything that may come after the eclipse. I hope that I can draw nearer to Christ by accepting his servants and following them, the prophets.
Amen. Amen.
Awesome. Okay. Well, because I'm hitting the road on Thursday, I'm not sure we'll be able to hop on another podcast. I think we are going to be guests on a podcast tomorrow night, maybe. And hopefully that one gets published this week. We may, because we only got a quarter of the way through the list, we may pick this up before I leave on Wednesday. We'll see.
Okay. Thanks, everybody.
Awesome.
Awesome. Thank you.
Bye.
See ya.